I love places that are steeped in history, but I suppose you can guess that from Downton and stuff. But it's a lovely place, and it's a very cold night, and I'm so grateful for you all to come out. I mean, it's such a great turnout. So thank you all. I hope you enjoy the film, what we've done with it, and we'll probably have more to chat to you about later. So enjoy the film. Thank you.
We have with us 4 of the people connected with this film, including the young star. And you will now perhaps welcome them if they can come on down and take some seats. Sophie, Nélisse. Markus, Zusak, who wrote the novel. Roosevelt, who is the producer of many films that you know. And Brian Percival, you met earlier. He is the director of the film, and for somebody who works for PBS and once made a fool of himself in a fundraising break just after the final episode last spring, one of the people that gave us Downton Abbey. I'd like to, we're going to ask you to ask them any questions you'd like. We'll take about 15 minutes here. I know you all want to get home. But I wanted to begin just to get the ball going. Something Jeffrey Rush said in my interview. In fact, the very first thing he said, you may remember, Sophie. He said, okay, yes, this is absolutely set in a small German town during the Nazi era, and it's very grounded in that. But really, over history, there have been many small places where there have been evil influences. So it has happened before in different ways. It seems to be part of human nature. And Brian, I was mentioning in the New York Times today, the letters to the editor section, there's a small community about 90 miles outside of New York that is currently going through a huge surge of anti-Semitism. You may have heard about that. So to what extent did what Jeffrey say, maybe Brian, if you'll begin, can you identify with and have thoughts about it? Markus, then maybe you could.
Well, I think that's, there's certainly a truth in that, because, quite often in films over the years, people have portrayed Nazis really as one-dimensional. They're blonde, blue eyes, square jaw, and they smoke evil cigarettes and stuff. And in some ways, that's dangerous, just to dismiss how this film's about the corruption of a generation and how people, ordinary people, were twisted into believing something that was so wrong and so bad, but a lot of people went along with it because they didn't realise or because they didn't know what was going on. And I think that's far more dangerous, that ordinary people can be led to believe something which is so wrong when that they can be forced into believing something which is so wrong when it's just, to dismiss them as a stereotype isn't to understand what terrible things people can be coerced or forced or tricked into believing.
And of course, just next door is 12 Years a Slave. And one of the messages there was people, they didn't think it was wrong. They thought it was a natural state of things, one of the major things they wanted you to cross in that film. Markus, you wrote the novel. Did you want to comment on that before we ask for questions?
I don't have too much else to say apart from what Brian said, but I grew up hearing stories of my parents about their time growing up, and it was never black and white, and they had childhoods, and they were really, really young at this time, and and my mum's father didn't want to hang the Nazi flag on Hitler's birthday. My dad himself was made to go to Hitler Youth like every other 10-year-old, and he just went, that's just bloody boring. I'm not going to go to Hitler Youth, I'm just going to go to the river and throw rocks into the water. And he'd get home and his parents would say, how was it? And he'd go, oh, it's great. And so I grew up hearing stories like that, and then I started to do a bit of research, and I started to see that there were more people like that, and I started exploring those pockets, and those stories were interesting to me, and then I thought I'd write a 100-page novel, and things got a bit out of hand and turned into the book it became. So that's just how it worked out. But I think in the case of this, I think what I really love is that I wrote a book that I really wanted to mean something to me, and it became something that meant everything to me. And I think Brian, Karen, and everyone involved, Sophie, it's just, and the cast, I think it came to mean everything to them as well in the filming of it, and that's what I mean, so it's a real honour.
Karen, with you and Sophie's permission, I'll open it up for questions now, and we'll see. I'm sort of the question wrangler, so if somebody will raise their hand. Yes, please.
How did the town respond to being transformed into that environment?
I know most of you can probably hear that, but it's been requested. Not everybody hears as well. I don't more and more. This is true of me, so I'll repeat the question. How did the town respond to being part of this?
Well, we built the street at Babelsberg Studio, and the book burning was done in Görlitz. And it was very interesting, and Brian can speak to it, because as we all know, certain aspects, like icons of that period, the Schwarzsticker and the Uber Alice, have been banned. So, Brian, do you want to talk about
There's
that?
quite a bit of material in the film, like the swastika, and we had about 450, 500 extras singing the German national anthem. And, you know, the first two verses of that are banned, they're forbidden. And as is the swastika, that it's against the law to own one or let alone display it. And so consequently, because of that, we had to get a special dispensation from the German authorities to allow us to put these up and to sing for these extras to sing these songs. And we had to actually teach the extras the verses to the songs, because they didn't know they'd been banned. If you go on YouTube in Germany and you try to find out something about the history at that time, you'll just hit a page that says this material is banned. So you really, we were allowed to do it only because it was considered to be educational, in the sense of people who might see this, what we do in the end, may glean from it what actually happened at that time and how wrong it was. And I remember when we were filming this sequence, and Book Burning particularly, it was quite an emotional time, and I had an almost entirely German crew and 450 German extras, and I looked around and many of the crew members had tears rolling down their cheeks, because they were moved by what happened, to the point of, they felt some sort of shame for what their forefathers had been involved in, and and it was at that point where I felt I think we might be sort of touching a nerve here, at least with the with the German people.
Somebody else? Yes, behind you and then you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the God element. When you were writing the book, did you write the book and then add the God element? Did you start with the God element? How did that come?
Are you saying God element?
I am.
Okay. Markus, the God element?
All right, well, so basically the whole idea was that Death was going to narrate the book, and there's this, so I just had the idea that people say that war and death are like best friends, and who better to be hanging around wartime than Death, so that was who I decided would narrate the book. Death does talk about God. He says something like, you think you're the only, sometimes I say God, but he never answers me. You think you're the only one he doesn't answer, and he also says, if you want to know what God, if you really want to know what I look like, as in death, forget the robe and the scythe or the sickle. Go and have a look in the mirror. And I wanted death to be sort of like a part of us, the missing part of us, and that's why he speaks in a way that is like us, but just a little bit to the left or the right.
Sir?
I hope that makes sense.
I wanted to say your performance, young lady, was 5-star. The question is, was it very, very difficult to do a period piece where we're removed about 80 years back in time, especially at such an intolerant, dark period? How was that for you?
Before she answers that, I should say that out in the lobby you would have seen extraordinarily modern teenager dancing to particular music in a style that indicates. So how did you get into 80 years ago, Sophie?
Actually, it's really a bad thing, but at my age, at school, we don't learn about the Holocaust that much, and I think it's a bad thing because we should learn a lot more. So I had to do a lot of research. So I watched a lot of movies. I watched Schindler's List, The Reader, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Life is Beautiful, The Pianist, probably even more. And it was also great that it was shot in Berlin because everywhere you go, there's walls or there's posters of information telling stories about history. And just walking through the city, seeing all these monuments like the Berlin Wall or going through some bomb shelters is really amazing, and you can learn so much. And I'm actually really, really happy. I can see a lot of kids in the room. That makes me really happy. Because I went to see the movie a month ago with my best friend. She's actually really smart, and she didn't even understand anything, like everything. So there's parts that I had to explain to her. And I remember when she went back at home, I think she told me that she went on Google and like searched Holocaust and learned a bit more. And I thought that was amazing because it made me realize how kids my age, or my generation, we don't know enough about what happened. So I just really, really hope that, in 100 years, people think it's annoying that we keep on showing these movies. But in 100 years, I think that if we don't continue making these movies, people are going to have no idea about what happened. So we have to keep on showing these movies so that people don't forget the people that died and the people that fought for, and that it doesn't happen again. So I think.
Yes, young person there.
I wanted to know how you made the effects to make the truck flip over.
Special effects.
Well, what we do is we specially reinforce the truck so it's got a metal cage over the back of it underneath the canvas so that it won't squash completely when it flips over. And then what we do is we put a huge compressed air cannon into the base of the truck, and we put steel plates over the road, and what happens is at a given point, which we've all measured out, and we know where the cameras are going to be, and we think we know where it's going to land. It isn't always the case. It didn't quite land where we wanted it to, but thankfully we had somebody on focus who could adjust. And then we drive the truck down the road, and somebody presses a button, and the whole truck jumps up in the air and rolls over. So, and then we take the cannon out on computer afterwards, and we put a bit of an explosion in. And that's what we do.
I wanted to ask Sophie, what were one or two of the most challenging scenes for you, and how you handled some of the more emotional aspects of the movie.
Getting her to
Challenging
kiss
scenes and
Rudy. That was the toughest day of the whole shoot. It was just trying to make these two kiss one another.
It was. No, it's because that was the whole day when we were doing the whole sequence of everyone dying. So first of all, I knew that I had to cry all day. And then at the end, on top of that, I had to kiss a guy. But it was so hard because me and Nico, we were like best friends, and we were like brothers and sisters. After a week, I was annoying him and he was annoying me. And then after 4 months, I was really annoying him and he was really annoying me. And we were just so close, and that day was so awkward. We were like, the night before, we were like best friends, and that day we exchanged maybe one word. Which was like, I'm sorry, I'm doing this. It was not something fun to do. And what you guys don't know is that in the script, I kissed him twice. So I had to kiss him twice in the scene, so I kissed him 24 times. And in the movie, you only see it once. So I saw the movie and I was like, Brian, you can tell me that before I shot the scene, I would have made only 12 kisses. There's like a huge difference here. But yeah, so that was the hardest day and the hardest, scene. But I mean, I don't know, I just cried all day and think about sad things. But at the end, I was a bit depressed. So, well, I was really depressed because I've been crying all day. But then I was like really happy because it's like, it was done.
Fair enough. I want to turn this direction, but okay.
I wondered about your choice of language. That's the question I had. What made you decide? It was basically accented English with the German words thrown in here and there. And since they were speaking in English and it was supposed to be straight German, you must have made a decision there not to make it straight English.
Why the accent?
Yeah.
How did you go about choosing that?
There's a couple of thoughts in this chain. Is that first of all, is if we were being completely authentic, then we would have made the film in German. But the problem with making the film in German is that it won't appeal to a wider English-speaking audience. Even today, a lot of people don't want to go and read subtitles for 2 hours, and I completely understand that. So what we're left with is the decision that we have to unify the speech throughout the film. Now, when I've seen films in the past that have allowed actors to use their own accents, be it in this case Canadian, English, or French Canadian, English and Australian for the chief players, that always takes me out of the film. Whenever I've heard that, I don't believe it because I start to think about, well, how did they all sort of come from the same place if they all talk differently? So then we're left with the idea, okay, we've got to unify, so we've got to go, so do we go with English or do we go with German? Or Germanized English, if you like. Now Markus in the book, which was our guidebook for making the film, what he does is he quite often uses German words like Saucher and Saumensch, and ja, and those sort of, and so it seemed to, and along with the fact that we have something like 25 German actors who speak English with a German accent, if I didn't give everyone the same, or attempt to give everyone the same sort of accent, then I'd have 25 actors with the German accent and 4 speaking English. So you kind of, if you look at all the options that are available, the most obvious and probably the most unifying is the fact to speak English but with an adopted German accent, and that hopefully the idea is, and I think for the most part it works, is probably 5 or 10 minutes in, you kind of forget about it, and what you have is, to all intents and purposes, to speak in German, but we can understand them. That was the idea.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My question's for the author, Markus. Can you just talk a little bit about the character of the father of Jeffrey Rush's character? And, he was obviously very sympathetic and managed to retain his humanity. Can you talk a bit about him?
Jeffrey Rush's character.
Sure. It's funny, before I even answer that, this has been nagging at me. I've heard just in the story, I can't help but be a bit mischievous now, and just hearing the talk about the kiss and everything. Sorry, Sophie. I'm sort of wondering if it's going to end up on the extras on the DVD at least. And like that'd be, I reckon that'd be all right. Just to see that, because it must have been a really intense day. But to answer the question, I grew up hearing about that character. My mum told me a lot of stories I'm telling you, that's not me. I think it's the screen.
I think we're radioactive. It's the screen.
I'll try to go on. He actually played the harmonica, my mum's foster father, and I thought I can't, and so you just start to change things, and as soon as I changed it to the accordion for a couple of reasons, and one was because it's even though both involve air coming in and out, the accordion does have lungs, and so it's like a life force almost. The other reason is most of the time you do things in a book or a film, I'm imagining, because you've got a problem, and the problem I had in that case was that I'd written a previous book where someone played the harmonica. And so I thought I can't do it twice, you know, I'll become the harmonica guy. And so I used the accordion. So you just take these things and then you just move it around. It's like Lisa was based on my mum, and she was a foster child, but as soon as her brother dies at the start of the book and the film, it's, to me, she stops being my mum at that exact moment because it didn't actually happen to her. That was a different story I'd heard. And then the characters start to become totally themselves. And that's what I love about all the performances in the film too. They just, and what everybody did with it is that they made it their own. And that's really what I was hoping for.
5 minutes. Yes.
Well, this is for Sophie. Like, you did a lot of research and you played a really big part in such an amazing movie. Do you really think that you have a good understanding about what was going on in Nazi Germany, as not just the Holocaust, but the entire situation? And Markus, I love you.
Thank you, I feel exactly the same way about you.
I think so.
No.
No, that was not on either.
Repeat the question.
You said. To what extent could she get a feeling for what the life was like day to day there in that town in Nazi Germany?
So, I think I understand, well, obviously a lot more since I've done this research, but I still think there's a lot of things that I'm not understanding. Like, I went to a Museum of Tolerance, I think. Yeah, the Holocaust. The Holocaust Museum, and I just learned a lot again. I just learned everything, like a lot of new things again. So I think I know a lot more, and I know more than my friends do, but I still think I don't understand everything, and I still need to do a lot of research.
Okay. Yes.
This is for the author. This question's for the author. So, a lot of folks write books, and only very few become movies. And after you go to see a movie, you hear people say, "Oh, the movie wasn't as good as the book," or "I love the book," or "I never saw the book. The movie was fantastic." For the first time, I have a sensitivity towards the creator now that I see you there. So now that you have written this book, which has been appreciated, very appreciated, and turned into a very beautiful movie, where does this story sit in your creative sphere or your imagination? You wrote it, it was in your head, and now it's very live in our eyes and our souls with a different voice and maybe different portraits. So I just want to know, yeah, your relationship to your story now that you've seen it like this.
You got one that works?
Thanks, Sophie. I don't know, I don't think about things too heavily like that, and I try to only think about, I'm already worrying about my next book, and I've got enough problems with that, and that's what I always say, is that people think to be a writer you've got to have a great imagination. You just need to have a lot of problems, and I have a lot of problems writing this book, which is why it came to mean so much to me, and it's getting around those problems is where your imagination is, and so for me, it's interesting because all of this has been in my head for 10 years or even longer since my childhood, hearing some of the stories that inspired the book. And to walk onto the set, probably the best way is to talk about what it was like to walk onto the set and just see it from the outside in for the first time. It was quite amazing, and it was a real privilege. And I think I'm able to step outside and just step away from it and say, I was so happy to put it in creative hands and say, now do what you want to do. Because you can't say to, I think of it like this, like when there's a director, you've got to trust them, you've got to have the respect that they can do what they can bring to it. Because you'd never imagine me saying to Jeffrey Rush or Emily Watson, hey, just come over here, Jeffrey, maybe try it like this. And so you can't say that to the director either. and or the producers. You've got to let them make it theirs, and I was more than happy to do that. And that book killed me, so I wasn't going to line up and try to do it all over again in a film.
For one sentence, I'll step out of my role. I've often said this: if the film is like the book, the film shouldn't be made. Books come to you through your imagination. Film is a visual medium. You're making different decisions. So that's a question that has always bothered me when people say, oh, it wasn't as good as the book. It's not supposed to be the same as the book. Last question, I guess that's you. Ma'am? Yes?
More freedom doing the series, you can do more with it, you're not as bound by the book, or what did you find?
It's the one and only Downton Abbey question. See, you like the movie enough. To what extent was they similar or different? Last question.
Thanks, Sophie. She always tells me what to do, and I listen. I think I'm fortunate in the several TV things that I've done. I've always been allowed to put my own style on. Indeed, I started off Downton. I think Maggie and Hugh were on board, and then I came on board. So we cast the rest of the show, and we, found the locations and set up the style that everybody then had to follow, because that was the style of the series. So in terms of having more creative control, I think it's more or less about the same. Because people have been thankful that people have employed me for what I do, and have allowed me to do that. This film was very a labour of love very much for Karen and Cam Lancaster, the other co-producer, and so I was just fortunate that when I came along, that we shared the same ideas as we did with John Williams. Everybody really that came on board with this had the same ideas about how we wanted to do it, so. It's still hopefully my style of how I do things. I think the biggest difference is that in a feature film you're allowed more time, and you're allowed more, there's obviously a bigger budget than a television show, so you're allowed to do things like build streets and have lots of cranes and helicopters and all those sort of things. So they allow you to, they really allow you to expand on what you do. But the essential sort of creative approach, I think that's what people employ you for, whether it's Downton or book theatre.
Beautiful films.
Thank you.
Karen, Markus, did you want to say something?
Yes, I counted 20 children in the scene, in the theater, and I just wanted to say thank you for bringing in your children. And for the other ones, we'll just thank you for coming.
Thank you.